investigation. He said it looked like they died of fright. In 37, a schooner captain said several crew members had reported a pack of wild dogs roaming Bowers Harbor. His story was never recorded. In 57, a man at the cloth found claw marks on an old church door. The newspaper said they'd been made by a dog. He'd have had to stood 7'4". In 67, a van load of hippies told a park ranger named Quinlan they'd been awakened in the night by a scratch at the window. There was a dogman looking in and grinning. In 77, there were screams in the night near the village of Bel Air. Could have been a bobcat, could have been the wind. Nobody looked up there. Then in the summer of 87, near Luther, it happened again. At a cabin in the woods, it looked like maybe someone had tried to break in. There were cuts around the doors that could only been made by very sharp teeth and claws. He didn't wear shoes because he didn't have feet. He walked on just 2 paws. So far this year, no stories have appeared. Have the dogmen gone away? Have they disappeared? Soon enough, I guess we'll know, because this is the time to fear. For another 10 years has come around. The 7th year is here. And somewhere in the Northwoods darkness, a creature walks upright. And the best advice you may ever get is don't go out at night.
Now that was called The Legend of the Dogman. And welcome to episode 3 of the Torchcast. Good evening, Bulldogs and fellow listeners. I have a very special episode in store for you tonight. And if it's not night, get in the mood as if it's night. Because, well, we have no guests. So it's just me and the tale of the Michigan Dogman, as that poem said. Yes, the Michigan Dogman. An urban legend that has been circulating here in the mid-Michigan area since the early 1800s, with the sighting right here in our fair city of Big Rapids back in 1961. Before diving in too deep, however, allow me to start at the beginning and run through the history and legend behind the Dogman. Now, the Dogman is a cryptid variously described as, well, a large dog that can stand upright or a dog-headed creature with a human body. It has allegedly been spotted in the northern parts of Michigan's Lower Peninsula since the late 19th century, and more specifically, like I said, in the mid-Michigan area. Basically where we are, within about 50 to 80 miles. Wonderful, right? Anyways, dating back to 1887, the earliest encounter supposedly occurred when a group of lumberjacks in Wexford County chased the Dogman into a hollow log. Mistaking the monster for, well, an ordinary dog, one of the men tried to get it out of the log by jabbing it with a stick. The men heard a terrible scream, and then the Dogman jumped out and scared them all away. Now, in 1987, a Traverse City radio DJ, yes, we jumped about 100 years, a Traverse City radio DJ named Steve Cook released a ballad about the Dogman, which increased the monster's popularity. See, Cook, however, thought that the Dogman was just a joke, and it was intended to be a April Fool's prank on his listeners. However, upon making the song/poem, came to find out that, well, there's a little bit of history behind the Dogman. Anyways, because due to this, listeners began to call in to share their own encounters, and the older stories began to surface as well, such as that 1887 incident with the lumberjacks. See, there was also another story, and this being one of the more interesting stories, came from a Robert Fortney, an elderly man who claimed to have seen a similar creature in the late 1930s. While fishing in a river near Paris, Michigan, fellow listeners, local listeners, if you know where Paris is, it's not too far away. He saw a pack of wild dogs emerge from the woods. He scared off most of the pack with a warning shot from his gun, but a large black dog with blue eyes refused to leave. In fact, the dog rose on its hind legs and gave Fortney an intimidating stare. Apologies, getting tongue-tied. Before it could get any closer, however, Fortney shot the dog and then watched it run back into the woods. Now, despite the many encounters and sightings over the years, no physical evidence has ever really turned up to prove that the Dogman exists. In the late 2000s, a home video containing footage of the Dogman appeared on the internet, but of course this was later debunked as a hoax. So you could say the Dogman is Michigan's version of Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster. So, my local Michiganians, or Michiganders, whatever you like to be called, I guess we can take pride in the fact that we have our own very cryptid. Of course, though, I feel like to those listening right now, being here at Ferris, you're more interested in what I mentioned being the Big Rapids incident during 1961. And this is from an excerpt of the story. So this is not me talking, this is me talking through the person involved. Anyways, when I was a boy, my father was the night watchman at a manufacturing plant located in a rural area between Big Rapids and Chippewa Lake, Michigan. Our house, which, if I remember right, was a perk of the night watchman job, which was across the street from said factory. The plant building was right next to a large wilderness area of state land, and at that time it was simply known as the Haymarsh, but now it is officially called the Haymarsh State Game Area. We didn't understand it at the time, but Dad was always very skittish about letting us play outside after dark. He would sometimes talk about hearing coyotes or bears roaming around in the Haymarsh when he was walking the perimeter of the building at night. One night in the summer of 1961, Dad walked back to the house to sit on the porch and have a cup of coffee and a sweet roll. He had a good view of the entire plant property. He saw some movement near a chain link fence behind the building, and this was approximately around 3 a.m., so he felt quite sure that this person wasn't there by accident. He drew his gun and watched for a few minutes. That's when he noticed that this was not a person at all, but something much taller. He said it appeared to be covered in brown gray hair, it had very broad shoulders, and a powerful chest. It alternated between walking on 4 legs and standing up on 2. He said it seemed to be looking for something along the driveway. He said he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing, actually. He quietly moved into the house and grabbed his Kodiak Signet 35mm camera, which was his pride and joy. At this point, I should also mention that Dad was quite a photography buff. His father had owned one of the first camera stores in Ohio, and Dad got the shutter bug from him. As he stepped back onto the front porch, however, the creature moved slowly along the driveway, directly under the lights. He adjusted the camera shutter for a long exposure, held it as still as he could. He said he was shaking pretty badly, and then snapped the picture. I've enclosed a print of it in this letter, and there is a picture. However, I don't really know the validity of the photo, as it could be a fake, as some of these stories. Who knows if some of these stories are true? They're all just kind of fun to talk about. Anyways, on that aside, Dad said a few seconds later, the thing dropped back down to all fours and slowly moved off into the woods. He sent a print to the local newspaper and sent copies to several magazines. One that I think was called The Mysterion published the photo in their spring issue of 1962. Dad had a copy of the magazine for years, but it was misplaced after he passed away. I still have the negative strip that contains this image. If you'd like to have someone examine it, I also still have Dad's Kodiak Signet. I haven't shot any pictures with it for several years, but I'm pretty sure it still works. Now again, I can't really judge whether this to be true or not. Of course, it'd be fun to think it's true, especially, hey, we got a creature roaming around here in Big Rapids, and it's almost Halloween, so it just kind of seemed kind of fitting. However, it's just, it's wild. There are so many stories that come out when stuff like this happens. The second you hear something about it, like the UFOs in the 1950s, after Roswell, all of a sudden, hundreds of reports came in about UFOs. The same thing seemed to have happened with the Dogman, except in that reversal sort of way. Because when the DJ released it in 1987, him and his manager had thought they created the Dogman through mixing the Jersey Devil and other creatures of the same sort. They thought they were the creators. However, it obviously was not the case as stories came in. So, was there any validity to this? Who knows? Who really knows? But I'm also going to go into a little more recent story that comes from Sparta, Michigan around the fall of 1987. Again, another quotation. One weekend, back around fall of 1987, my two best friends and I were staying at my family's cabin, which is not far from the small town of Sparta. About 20 minutes north of Grand Rapids, actually. My two friends left to have dinner while I stayed behind at the cabin. Following the dinner, the men headed back towards Sparta and the cabin. What happened next would shock and disturb them for years, as it was dark and they were on a rural road. Suddenly, both of them saw something standing by the side of the road. In the headlights of the car, it appeared to be a human-like figure covered in gray fur, and as they got closer and past the figure, both of them got a very good look at it. It was the size of a man, stood on two legs, it was covered head to toe in gray fur, and had a wolf-like face. It even raised its hands and seemed to snarl at them as they drove by. They said it looked like a werewolf out of a Hollywood movie. My two friends didn't dare stop, however. They continued driving. And of course, they were peppering each other with questions. Did you see that too? Was that a dog? Was that someone dressed up in a costume? And so on. And as they are having this animated conversation, they passed by the sign that says, "Welcome to Sparta," and drove through the small main street, and continued on out of the town in the direction of my cabin. Their conversation about what had just happened continued, when both of them looked up to see that same "Welcome to Sparta" sign again, followed by the same main street that they had just driven through only moments ago. They hadn't stopped or turned around. They had been traveling in the same direction on the same road, but somehow without any noticeable interruption in their journey, they had somehow been sent backwards several miles. Until this point, it would be easy to dismiss this event as someone playing a joke. However, the time displacement characteristic is what sets this account apart, with such things are well documented in UFO and alien abduction stories. It's something we've not seen before in Dogman sighting reports, however. And Andy, the man name, continues, "I remember when they finally showed up at my cabin. They arrived no later than what I expected them to, around 9 p.m. or so, and I remember how animated they were about their strange encounter. But I just assumed they had seen a large dog and were telling me an embellished story in order to get a laugh. But 20 years later, both of them still insist that this was no joke. I have no idea what to make of this story, and maybe it was just some teenagers in a werewolf costume playing pranks. And did my friends really experience lost time afterwards? Or did they just make some wrong turns on their drive and didn't notice because they were talking and distracted? I honestly have no idea, but I would love to know if anyone else has seen similar things in the Sparta area." So again, that second story contains, well, another sighting of the Dogman. Although time displacement, that's fascinating. Can't say I've ever experienced or heard anything of the sort before, but could the Dogman be a supernatural-like being? Could it be from another world? Who knows? It's an entertaining idea. All of this really is. However, of course, I have a third and final story which takes place in Reed City in 1993, which isn't that far away. See, from the quotation of the website, the area around Reed City, Michigan has been a hotbed of Dogman activity. This report details an event that occurred nearly 20 years ago, but the witness remembers it like it was yesterday and is unshakable in her story. Her name is Courtney, and her experience took place during the winter of 1993 to 1994. Courtney was a teenager at the time and was sneaking cigarettes behind her parents' home near Todd Lake, northeast of Reed City. The sun was setting on a clear, cold winter day, and Courtney was facing a large abandoned barn on the property next door. The barn had always kind of spooked me, she says. It was filled with rusty old equipment, the outer planks were all rotten, and it sagged and leaned in every direction. My dad said to stay away, as the whole thing could collapse any second. Now, on that evening, though, I was standing about 50 feet from the barn and saw sunlight coming through the siding. Courtney, she took her eyes off the barn, and the light flickered. See, she couldn't really tell what it was. She turned as the thing... Ooh, sorry, getting all done to this. Let me back up a little bit. Courtney took her eyes off the barn for a few minutes. Then something caught her attention again. There was some movement. The light flickered, but I couldn't really tell what it was. This is coming from Courtney, by the way. It turned its head back and looked straight at me. It was at least 6 feet tall, if not more. It was dark colored. It had a dog-like appearance, pointy nose, and really big pointy ears. Courtney dashed into her house to grab a flashlight. When she turned outside, she shined it toward the barn door, but the animal was no longer there. Now, reading this next part, I don't know why she did this, but she walked closer to the barn to look for tracks in the heavy snow. When she didn't see any, she realized the creature might still be inside, and ran back to the safety of the house. She never saw the creature again. She later talked to a neighbor who had seen something. The size of a buffalo, but the shape of a dog. In the same... Oh my goodness, sorry guys. In the same... Whoa, goodness, computer. I'm losing my quotes. In the same barn a few months before Courtney's encounter, the neighbor said she had been so frightened she was near hysterics for days. Her father had taken his gun and searched the barn, but found nothing there. At the time of these events, neither of the girls had heard of the legend song and did not know about the Dogman legend in Michigan until years later. See, that took place in 1993, 1994, which was 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, about 7, 8 years after that song played. So as you can tell, this legend has been around for quite some time. And I may sound like I'm beating a dead dog here, but think about that. And are there any stories that you've heard? Have you ever heard the legend of the Dogman before this podcast, if you are listening? Because if so, I would definitely love to hear more about that. I would love to hear the stories, because this tale has absolutely caught my attention, and I really just kind of want to know more. Like, is this just some joke? Am I getting my leg pulled? Is this a website to be just mess with people on? I don't know. I kind of hope it isn't, because now, like I said, I'm super excited. I want to know more. Oh well, though. I guess we'll never truly know unless there is ever physical evidence, because word of mouth is a tricky thing. Anyways, though, guys, this will be a little bit of a shorter episode as there was no guest, and this is just kind of me ranting, not really ranting, but telling a story. A story that I want you to kind of go out and take away and wonder. Wonder if it's true, wonder if it's fake, maybe do some of your research on your own. Maybe do some of your research on your own words. Thank you. Really, supernatural stuff like this is something that you can't really just look at and look up an article and take it word for word and trust it. You really got to kind of check it out on your own if you believe in that kind of stuff. And, I got to say I'm about 50-50 on it. I haven't really experienced anything on my own. Stuff I can't really say I confidently believe was supernatural in being, but nonetheless, I want to. I want to believe it, because that would make life so much more interesting, albeit scary. But anyways, guys, thank you again for listening to episode 3 of the Torchcast. I hope you enjoyed the tale of the Dogman, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. And tune in next week for what will probably be a very entertaining game show. Yes, a game show, hosted by myself and a hopeful second entertainer. So, anyways, guys, take care. Much love to y'all, and adios.